Welcome to this channel. In this course of HTML and CSS, this is lesson number 20. And in this lesson today, we are going to start the topic of fonts, which is a very important topic in front-end web development especially. And this is the part 1 of this fonts topic, and the second part would be in the next video. So in this font is really important for your front end. So choosing the right font for your front end or your website's web page is very important. It makes the readability for the user quite easier so that user may understand it. And another thing that font does in a very better way is that it could make an awareness for your brand as well, a strong identity for your brand with its identity as a font. So using a font that is easy to read is important. The font adds value to your text. It is also important to choose the correct color and text size of the font. We are going to talk about the font size and different things and styles and weights in just a minute. So just stick with us. So the next topic, generic fonts. Actually, these are 5 families. You can see all the other fonts which are generated yet are all related to these families. These are the basic generic fonts in CSS. All the other fonts that are you could download from internet or you use from Google Fonts, all of them are related to or are sub fonts from these generic fonts. So what are actually the identification of each of this generic font family? So the first one is serif font, and in this font you have small strokes at the edges of each letter. So we are going to see its practical example in a minute as well. So for now, just stick to the theory. So it gives a bit of sense of formality and elegance, whereas the second font family, which is sans-serif fonts, the difference between serif fonts and the sans-serif fonts is just only this, that sans-serif doesn't contain any sort of serif or strokes at its edges, whereas serif contain those edges. We are going to see those edges in a minute. So they create a bit of look of modern and minimalistic look, whereas in monospace fonts these letters have almost the same width for each letter, so it creates a mechanical look, whereas the cursive font generic font family imitates the human handwriting as it looks like it is handwritten, whereas the fantasy font is used where you want to show some sort of extra decoration. So this is the difference between serif and sans-serif. The first one right here, this F, is sans-serif. It doesn't contain any sort of strokes at its edges, whereas this serif font, as we talked about, they contain extra strokes around at the edge of each character. So this is the difference between serif and sans-serif. By tradition, actually on computer screens, sans-serif fonts are more readable than serif fonts. So for example, these are the font examples and names of the fonts, some of the names of fonts related to these generic font families. So for example, in serif we could find Times New Roman, Georgia, Gremont, and in sans-serif we could find Arial, Verdana, Helvetica. Whereas in this serif font family, you can see all of the letters contain these strokes at the end of them, whereas in sans-serif there isn't any sort of stroke. In monospace, all the letters have nearly the same height or are in a symmetry, giving a mechanical look, whereas in cursive they give the depiction of human handwriting, and in fantasy they are extraordinarily decorative or joyful fonts. Then in font family, this is a property in CSS which is used to specify the font we want to use in our CSS or give to our text. So actually the traditional way of giving the value here is that first of all you write the name of your font that you want primarily to use. So if the font is only one word, then you can just write it there, but if it contains more than one word, then you should use it in a double quotation around them. Like in this example, you can see Times New Roman, it contains multiple words, so it is written inside double quotation. So another tip, the font family property should hold several font names and as fallback for system to ensure maximum compatibility between browsers or operating systems. So what is this fallback system? We are going to talk about them in our upcoming slides actually, but the fallbacks are fonts that are used by the browser. Primary font you are using isn't available or somehow it couldn't use it, so then fallback fonts are used. These are actually the font families, the generic font families related to these fallbacks. And if you write the generic font family related to your font, then it would pick up a font which looks similar to your primary font, and it would just use that to show your text inside the browser. Whereas this is an example of font family. So this is the way we use font family property and give values. Right in the first one, you can use, he has used the Times New Roman. It contains multiple words, so it is wrapping it inside double quotation, whereas this Times is a fallback and the serif is the generic family, so that it could pick a font related to this font and giving it the same look or to the backup font as well. So let us jump to our editor and see practical examples of these things. So right here, as you can see, these are our files from our previous lessons. So for today's lesson, which is lesson number 20, I'm going to give CSS fonts part 1.html, giving it a boilerplate. So, and giving it a title of CSS fonts part 1. Right here I can use a p tag, this and use a sort of lorem in it, lorem 50, it's enough maybe, and using internal CSS to style it. And in p I'm going to give it font family. Right before giving the font, let us just see it, how does it look by default. So let us go live and see it. Right here you can see that it contains this font by default, which is actually related to the serif font family. As you can see, it contains strokes around it. So let us use font family of Times New Roman, and as our fallback in this example, the fallback is Times and serif, generic family and serif. So as you can see, both of these fonts, the generic family and the name of the fallback font, are not inside inverted commas because they are single word names of the font. So let us see in our browser how does it look now. If we use this second example, which is related to sans-serif, it would completely change its look, which is Arial Helvetica sans-serif. Let us comment it so that it may contain a record for you. Font family Arial Helvetica and sans-serif. Let us see in our browser. Right here, as you can see, it has completed its complete look, and it is a bit more readable as well, as we talked in our previous slides as well. So after this font family, let us move to our next topic, which is font web safe. What is actually font web safe? So font web safe fonts are actually fonts that are universally installed in our browsers, in all of the browsers, and when you don't find any font which you have you have used as primary font, then it would just stick to that web safe font if you have given it right there in font family. Right here, as you can see, Tahoma, Verdana and sans-serif, the generic family, they are using the web safe fonts, which you should use if you are making a internationalized website. So if one is using it in Chrome and one is using it inside Internet Explorer, they would be getting a different visual effect of your website because they contain totally different methods to decode your website and show it on the web page. So using web safe font is really helpful because they could make the appearance of your website a bit of symmetrical in all of the browsers. So after this web safe font, these are some examples, the best web safe fonts for HTML that you can use in CSS. So these are listed fonts, web safe fonts. For example, Arial related to the sans-serif generic family, whereas Georgia related to the serif, and Courier New related to the monospace. And for recursive, we could use brushed script empty. So these are examples that you can use for your web safe fonts if you want to use them. So after that comes the main topic that about which we talked in our previous slides as well. So this is font fallbacks. So actually I told you as well that font fallbacks are the fonts that we could use there, and when the browser don't find your primary font, it could stick to this font fallback and fall back to this font to use it, and use that font to show the text on your website. So actually I have compiled a PDF for you people containing the list for each of these generic families, containing list for each fallbacks for each family. Here we are. So right, as you can see, these are the fallback fonts that you can use inside your CSS, so that they could give a better view of your website. Serif fonts and then sans-serif fonts. You can get the link for study materials and these files inside the description. The link would be there. After font fallbacks, we could use the font style. So actually this font style is primarily used to make the text italic mostly. So using the normal would keep it normal, and giving it the value of italic would make it italic, whereas oblique would make it like italic, but it is less supported, but because in some browsers it is not supported. So for example, if we may say here font style italic, then in our browser you can see that font has got a bit italic and a bit of curved. So inside this font example, these are the normal, this is the way of using normal value, italic value and oblique value. So that's it for this video. I hope you liked the video, and in the next lesson we are going to talk about a bit of more advanced things about fonts. So just stick with this series. Thank you for watching. Goodbye.